Hi there. Today, Limitless will be in English because we have a very special guest, Rana Adib, Renewable Energy Policy Network for 21st Century's Executive Secretary. Hello.
Hello.
Well, yesterday you published the Renewable Energy Policy Network's Renewables in STI's 2019 Global Status Report. First, I would like to start for our followers who doesn't know about REN21. What is REN21?
So REN21 is actually the only global community of actors from science, academia, governments, industry associations, and NGOs who work together to advance renewable energy. We do provide facts and figures that are peer-reviewed and up-to-date to then also really inform decision makers and enable them to accelerate the renewable energy transition worldwide, and actually also with the urgency of climate change. So moving to renewable energy now.
Well, when we checked your report today, we saw that cities are doing well. Well, when we see that cities are doing very well, why not the countries?
So the reality is that you will find countries that do better than others, as you will also find cities that do better than others. The tension is very different. At the national government level, we do see that they are in a situation where there is more pressure because we are operating in an economic system which is building on fossil fuel, and national governments are much more under pressure of certain interest groups, for instance. When it comes to cities, they have another flexibility here, and also they do have the possibility to really drive action to advance renewable energy, either for the municipal operations or also in citywide at their level, because they are policymakers, they are investors, they are trendsetters, they are visionaries that also mobilize other players in cities to engage in renewable energy uptake.
And when you look to the facts of the Renewables in STI's 2019 Global Status Report, how do you see it? Is it discouraging or is it hopeful?
So, especially these days, I tend to say that we need to be realistic about the challenges and realistic about the opportunities. I think that when we're looking at the cities that are really actively driving the renewable energy development, this is something which is quite encouraging. We see that there is a very clear awareness of the benefits of renewable energy. For instance, how they are contributing to cleaner air, reducing health impact of air pollution, how there are opportunities for creating jobs, for creating local economic opportunities, cost savings, etc. So I think this is really something where leading cities have a very, very good awareness. The other part also is, since they are very, very close to their citizens, cities can help actively to increase the social acceptance of renewable energy and of the transition towards a renewable energy-based system. And that's something which is positive. The difficulty, however, on the city front is that obviously cities do not always have, for instance, the economic means, the political authority to drive the transition independently of the national governments and also of the supranational players. And here we clearly see differences from one city to the other, partly linked to the size of cities, for instance, and their economic revenues, but also linked to the overall governance structures of cities in the country. So when we're taking examples of Europe, cities here have a very clear mandate. There is a tax redistribution to cities, which does not always take place in the same way in other parts of the world. And as a result, the cities there are more limited in their action.
Well, 55% of the people are living in the cities, and the cities are the cause of 75% of the carbon emissions. How can we reduce it?
How we can reduce it? I think there are many ways of reducing it. In this context, what is really important to also see, cities are not only responsible for 75% of the carbon emissions, but also 2/3 of the global consumption in final energy. And it is very clear that addressing climate change can only happen if we move from fossil-based energy system to an efficient and renewable energy-based system. So in this case, this means that cities can include, so when we're taking municipal operations, here there's the possibility, for instance, to include renewable energy directly in municipal buildings. There is a possibility to link waste management to the production of renewable energy by producing, for instance, biogas, which can then again be used in buses, for instance, biomethane buses. The other possibility or the other action cities have is clearly initiate and also support other players, whether it is citizens or businesses and even industry in the cities, to move to the transition. So this means developing renewable energy themselves, building efficient buildings, moving to less consuming transport means. And here cities can really, as a regulator, play a major role. I take the example when we're thinking about low-hanging fruits. So in cities you have new buildings, new areas. So we have the cities are growing. Many cities are growing. Case, it is very clear that cities can impose basically on new buildings to be zero emission or zero energy by having very good insulation, by integrating renewable energy, by also obliging new buildings to connect, for instance, to district energy system, whether it is heating or cooling. So here is a big opportunity. In general, cities need to understand that historically they have been energy consumers, but renewable energy today really allow them to become an active change agent in the energy transition, because they can produce their own energy and they can also govern the way energy is being consumed.
Well, at least 100 cities in the world are using 70% of their energy from renewables. Is that enough?
No, it's not enough, because unfortunately they are not using the energy only of basically not the overall energy, but the electricity of 100% renewable energy. And the reality is, when we're looking at the electricity part, this only represents globally approximately 20% of the total final energy demand. The big part is for heating, cooling, and transport. So transport, obviously, road transport is very present in cities when it comes to CO2 emissions and energy consumption. And in the heating and cooling part, it's approximately split between 50% in buildings and 50% in industry. And it is fundamental, actually, that the cities do not only purchase or cover their electricity needs with renewable energy, but also their heating and cooling needs. So, for instance, in buildings, and also moving not only to electric mobility, for instance, but also making sure that the electric vehicles do also consume renewable electricity, and not, as in many parts of the world, still coal-based electricity or nuclear electricity, etc.
Well, it's fact that we have a climate crisis. It's no climate change anymore, it's climate crisis. But even that, we have a very fast urbanization. So how can we build better cities to solve the climate crisis?
So I think what is really important is similar to the realism, I guess, on advantages and challenges, or opportunities and challenges. What is important here is to really take advantage of each other's players' strengths. And here it is very clear that cities have a key role to play. As you said, I mean, they are a main contributor, but they also represent 80% of the GDP. So it's a huge investment opportunity. And we have 55% of the population living in cities. So here's a real opportunity to build the citizens' support for the transition. The cities also have the possibility to contribute very strongly to the integration of the electricity sector with the transport and the heating and cooling sector. Now, to really build on this opportunity, and I think this is something which is fundamental, we need to have a strong integration of the policy frameworks between the national level, the subnational level, and the city level, which do really work together in the same direction and build on each other's strengths. Obviously, when we're talking about, national energy security, it's logical that cities can only contribute to this discussion. When we speak, however, about more local heating and cooling markets, this is something where cities can be key drivers. And that's something where we need to have a stronger integration of policy frameworks, stronger dialogues also between these players, leaving out of our comfort zones. That's one thing. And the other part is very clearly taking advantage of these low-hanging fruits. Today, we have this climate crisis, but there is a renewable energy technologies which are very often the least cost option. So they can right away be implemented, which means we need to make sure that we do avoid future CO2 emissions by building right away efficient and renewable-based infrastructure. That's one part, but also really using these renewables to create opportunities for job creation and that increase social acceptance to then also make it possible to move in a just transition, I guess, towards a renewable energy-based system.
And when we look to the Eastern Europe and Middle East, the cities in Europe, as Eastern Europe and Middle East, are they good at renewables, or we are still tracking back?
I think there are, again, it's really, this is one of the outputs also of the report. We do see some general trends, but we cannot say that all cities in one region are leaders or not. In general, the reality when we're looking into even Eastern Europe and Middle East, the reality is that cities today still have rather little political authority compared to some other regions. And as a result, they also have little financial resources and often also rather little competencies and human resources to really drive the energy transition. So I think this is really something which needs to be strengthened. So cities here need to be empowered to really rise up to their full potential. The reality is, however, also that there are some cities which are indeed leading, and very often we see that these are also cities which suffer quite significantly from air pollution, for instance. There is Dubai to mention, Abu Dhabi to mention, that become quite active when we're looking, for instance, in renewable-based cooling. Where the development of electric mobility is being advanced, etc., where there are also mandates, basically building mandates, which do already give the right direction in terms of the building sector.
And when we looked back in the recent years, China was the most polluter of the world, but I think today it's going to change. How do you see it?
So yes, to be honest, I mean, especially last week, there were many announcements in the press on China investing again significantly in coal, and so I really hope that the Chinese government and the cities are on track when it or continue their to follow basically their path on advancing the renewable energy transition. Very clearly, China has been leading renewable energy developments globally quite significantly and also in an accelerated way. What we see today, and this refers, for instance, to the transport sector, it's very often Chinese cities that are driving the transition towards electric mobility, not only in the light vehicle market, but also when it comes to municipal buses. Transit buses. And I think air pollution is such a major impact. In terms of health impact, it's responsible for over 40 million premature deaths. It is also responsible for huge amounts of cost. And I think that's just a reality where also Chinese cities continue to be aware of, and that's where they are engaging in the energy transition. And they also put some pressure on the national governments, actually. And I think this is another role cities can play. They can be very ambitious at their level, but they can also together form networks and become a voice of change agents that can influence national governments to be more ambitious.
In the cities, usually the governors or city governors are the decision makers. And how do you see them? Is their awareness for renewable energy and climate crisis enough?
I think there is never enough awareness for a renewable energy and climate crisis, and there is still a lot of awareness-raising information which is necessary. We do see that there are still many myths out there on renewable energy. We also see, and this is one of the reasons why we started doing the Renewables in Cities Global Status Report series, that there is lacking information on how the ambition of cities really translates into installed capacities of renewable energy and actively contributes, for instance, to a city's economy. So I think by producing the evidence, this will also help to raise the awareness. In general, it's also a reality that when you have smaller cities, for instance, that do not have dedicated teams to really look into the transition, it's a real undertaking actually to advance the transition. So it's very clear that cities also need to be empowered, and that's, for instance, where global city networks play a major role, but national governments can also play a major role. In terms of, as I said, like the understanding of the benefits of renewable energy, I think here the cities that are active on renewable energy do have a really good understanding of why it is of interest for them to develop renewable energy.
And when we look to Turkey, we can say from your report that Turkey has huge steps on geothermal energy. How about the other renewable energies in Turkey?
So I think there is always a space for improvement very much. I don't have the exact Turkish numbers in mind on their share of renewable energy, but in general we do see that. So I'll just mention the global shares here. In the electricity sector, there's 26% of renewable energy provided to the electricity demand. In heating and cooling, it's only 10%, and in transport, only 3%. So I think that with the geothermal activities, but also hydropower, wind, and solar, Turkey certainly has lots of engagements already. But in terms of really reaching a 100% renewable energy-based system, there is a lot of space for improvement. And I think what is really interesting here is there is a lot of space and opportunities for economic developments here. So when we're talking about one I think it was, I don't recall exactly, I think 100 megawatt of installed capacities is 14 jobs, 14 local jobs. And I think these are real economic opportunities. And the other fact is also, when we're talking about climate change, it is very clear that we need energy security and resilient energy structures. And this is something where it's clear that governments need to integrate the opportunities renewable energy present here much more.
REN21 Executive Secretary Rana Adib, thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Have a good day.
Thanks. Well, today at Limitless, our guest was REN21 Executive Secretary Rana Adib, and we talked about the Renewables and in Cities 2019 Global Status Report. Thank you for all your time. Thanks.